Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Karen's demands are mostly stupid and pointless, but Karen outdid herself in our first story, that's for sure. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Karen demands to go through bear territory. So for a little context, this story's not mine. This happened to my father in the 80s and the 90s, but I'll write in the first person. In the 80s, I lost everything I could. I dropped out of college, my father died of a heart attack, and my mother was somewhere in the wind. I wasn't worth the air I was breathing. As a last effort, I saved up some money to move to a different state so that I could start fresh. I chose Montana to be my new home. Because I didn't have a college degree, I knew I could only make a living with my hands and not my head. After a bit of looking around, I found work on a ranch. The owner of the ranch, let's call him Jack, took me under his wing. He taught me how to ride a horse, how to herd, how to do cutting, roping, and many other useful skills on a ranch. My goal was to have enough money for a deposit so I could buy a house, or at least some land. After about 3 years, I had the money, but I also loved the ranch and the folks so much that I chose to stay longer. In the spring of '88, I finally made the decision to quit. I was fully honest with Jack about what my intentions were. I told him that I wanted to buy some land and have a ranch of my own, and potentially get married and start a family. Being the absolute champ, Jack offered me some of the contacts of people who were selling land. After some time, I chose a piece of land near Jack's ranch. I got a loan, bought the land, and in the summer I started building my house. By winter, the house was done, and it was planned that in the spring I'll build a barn and some fences, corrals, among others. In the spring, it was back to work, and before summer started, I had nothing to do. I had a lot of time on my hands while I was waiting for all the paperwork to be done, and I wasn't going to spend 2 weeks sitting on my porch doing nothing when Jack promised me that if I would ever need it, he'd give me a job. Now, I didn't need a job because of money, but I just didn't have anything to do. So I went to my good old friend Jack if he needed some help. He said that he could use me to guide people on the tours he was offering. His ranch is not only in the cattle business, he also offers tours of the pristine nature on his property. I happily accepted the job despite me not liking people, but still it was better than just sitting on my front porch and doing nothing. The first few days went without a problem, but then a wild Karen appeared to brighten up the day. I was just returning from a tour when I saw this Karen in the middle of a field yelling at this girl who was also a guide. I didn't know the girl, but in my books, whoever makes a girl cry is an a-hole. I came over to them, and in the most passive-aggressive voice I can, I say, "Good day, what seems to be the problem?" And the Karen's wrath was now aimed at me, and she yelled back, "This bee has no respect for the desires of the customer. Give me a manager now." Now, I didn't expect such strong wording, but I kept my cool despite my hot-headedness, and I came up to the girl who's now sobbing because this Karen was mouthing off to her pretty good, and I say to her, "Leave her to me. I'll take care of her. You go take a break and tell Jack that I'll be with this piece of work." She gives me a grateful smile and a nod and rides away. I go to the Karen and I say to her, "Ma'am, I can't get you the manager as he's busy right now, but if you want, I can be your guide in her stead for the remainder of the tour." She replies very politely by saying, "Sure. I think even the trees will be better than that bee." Every part of my hot-headed self wants me to pretty much bury this woman right then and there, but I keep my cool and we head off on the tour. And within the first minute, what a piece of work she truly is. She behaves like she knows best and everyone is lesser than her and everything should be given to her. When we're about to turn around and go back, I give her a choice. We could either go the official route or we could return by the unofficial route, which is shorter, but there were bear sightings reported in the last few days. I tell her that the unofficial route is quite dangerous, but just as I wanted her to do so, she vehemently objects because she is the wisest person alive and knows the best. Great. My trap had worked. After about 5 miles on this unofficial route, she starts screaming and turns so pale that she's even more white than paper. In the distance, there's a grizzly. I knew about the danger I dragged both of us into, but in the end, it was technically her choice to go that route. I tell her to make herself as big and loud as she can. I follow suit, but the bear keeps getting closer. With every growl, Karen was getting even more pale. After it gets way too dangerous, I shoot a round out of my rifle and the bear gets scared and runs away into the woods. The entire ride back, she keeps yelling at me that I put her intentionally in so much danger. And yes, I'll admit it was quite reckless taking a visitor into a part of the woods where there were bear sightings reported, but technically she made the decision to go that route. I stay silent the entire ride because I can't keep a straight face. I was laughing maniacally in my head, and I knew that if I looked at her, I'd start laughing out loud. When we returned, she was shaking violently and was pale as ever. After I tied up her horse, she demanded that I get her the manager, and I gladly point her to the little building in the distance, and she storms off. She starts yelling at Jack, and I can see that Jack's trying his hardest not to break out laughing. I could hear that she was demanding that I be fired, but the neat part was I wasn't an employee of Jack's. I was doing it as a favor for a friend, and thus I couldn't be fired. After the Karen's tirade ends, Jack comes to me laughing like a kid, and he asks me, "How did you even come up with that, OP?" I start giggling as well and answer, "Well, she made the girl cry, so I wanted to give her special treatment. I heard of the bear sightings, and it worked out well in my favor." He then asks me not to do that again as it was reckless, and I agree, and I tell Jack I don't plan on doing it again, but I had a plan if the bear mauled the damn wrench. My defense would be that I gave her the choice to go on a safer path, but because she was apparently of higher intellect than me, I simply agreed. Jack gives me a smile and heads off. Years later, my father would end up meeting that girl guide again. Her name was Abby. But nowadays, I simply call her Mom. Aw, what a sweet ending. I wasn't expecting that for sure. So your father, I don't know if anyone ever told you this, but the overall story makes him sound like one of those protagonist cowboys from Old West movies. Bit rough around the edges, but a heart of gold. Saving gals all day while foiling the plans of any evildoer he comes across. And our second story. Gotta love the hospitality industry. I'm in restaurant management and have been in the industry for almost 12 years. I'm very comfortable in the workplace and walk pretty confidently. I'm also very aware of my surroundings, having been burned, run into, dropped things, etc. If you know the industry, we call it corner behind, stick our arms out to let people pass. Anyways, we're on a road trip and driving through a sleepy town and it was getting late. The only thing in town open is Red Lobster, so we go in. It was packed. After we order, I get up to use the restroom. I pass the server with a very full tray, and she looked like she was struggling and stuck my arm out to let her through and said, "You good, girl?" She laughed and said she was fine. I come out of the restroom, and as I'm walking back to the table, this older woman grabs my arm hard and starts screaming about their lack of cheddar biscuits. Total Karen, super aggro. I pull my arm away and say, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I don't work here," kind of chuckling to ease the tension. She proceeds to get angrier. "I saw you help that girl. I know you're the manager. How rude of you to ignore a valued customer." I just laughed and walked away. I walked up to the host stand and told the host about what happened just in case the server got crapped on. He asked which table, and I casually pointed to it. His response had me on the floor laughing. He rolled his eyes so hard, shaking his head, and says, "Mother effing Ethel." I'm sorry. She's probably the most evil person on the planet. But her family owns like half the town. Unfortunately, we're at her effing mercy. A few minutes later, the manager comes over to our table, super apologetic, and says he'll comp our meal. I told him absolutely not. I do the same job and have dealt with so much worse. Why do some people feel it's okay to lay hands on someone else? I don't care how upset you are. Don't touch me. She may own half the town, but she commands zero respect. Hope she's happy being hated her whole life. And our next story. Hold times. I worked as a service technician and every few months had to be on call to handle emergencies. There are set guidelines to what should be considered an emergency, but sometimes non-emergency jobs are pushed on the techs. I get one of these non-emergency jobs at the end of my workday, and my supervisor told me in no uncertain terms I had to do it even though I just pulled a 12-hour shift. I arrived at the customer's house at 10 p.m. and proceeded to spend time troubleshooting. After I'm done, it's after 11 p.m. and now I need phone technical support to update the modem and fix a few errors on the account. The problem is this normally would require tier 2.5 and they already all went home. Regular Tier 1.5 can do it, but they normally don't know how, and it's pointless even trying. The job must be completed according to my supervisor, though. I call support, and after being on hold for 2 hours, the customer's request, I leave and call him tomorrow when it's fixed. Still on hold, I head home and proceed to take a bath and relax. I end up being home for 2 hours before tech support finally answered. After explaining what I needed, they were confused and had to transfer me, but I'm disconnected instead. I end up being put on hold and being transferred multiple times until 10 a.m. the next day, and Tier 2.5 started working again. Overall, the job took over 12 hours to complete for what normally would have taken 30 minutes. This was all overtime pay, so I was happy to sit and watch TV for most of those hours. What was nice about this was my last night of on-call and I had the next day off. The customer does not always know what he wants. And our last story. The HOA wants to block my internet. About 2 weeks ago, I received a postcard in the mail from MetroNet, a fiber internet provider, letting me know that they had plans to expand into our area. A few days later, some small flags and signs from MetroNet appeared along the roads in our neighborhood, warning of future construction to install their lines and providing contact information. The day those signs appeared, I received an unsigned email from an address used by our HOA to send announcements to the residents via mailing list. The email claimed that MetroNet had not notified the HOA of their intentions to install. The sender stated they had contacted MetroNet to request they stop installation, accused MetroNet of bullying tactics, and encouraged the other residents of our neighborhood to contact MetroNet to request the same. I want fiber internet in our neighborhood. I work from home full-time since the pandemic and will be for the foreseeable future, and having the best possible internet connection is important to me. I replied to the email stating as such and was told by what I assume was the same person making the original post, since this too was unsigned, that I was missing the point because the HOA hadn't approved the project and that's not how this works. I took a bit of offense to that and asked why the default stance of our HOA was going to be to deny the progress of new infrastructure and whether previous notification from fiber internet companies would result in HOA approval. This inspired a response signed by our HOA president stating that unless the topic was addressed and approved by vote in our annual meeting, the HOA would not approve it. I spoke to MetroNet and they plan to have service available in October. Our annual meeting is in April, so it sounds like the plan from our HOA is to fight this because they don't intend to call a vote for months. In speaking to MetroNet, though, they said that they don't need HOA approval. They get their approvals from the city. I don't understand why the HOA prevents what's important to some people, for example, for work. Also, I wouldn't be surprised the HOA has a deal with the other provider. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.